So here's how the adventure engine works. Basically what you do is summon an adventure token which the entire engine revolves around. The way to do this is with the card Rite of Aramesir, which can be searched from your deck using Water Enchantress of the Temple from your hand or graveyard. Then, once you have your adventure token out, Rite of Aramesir also allows you to activate Fateful Adventure directly from your deck. You then use the effect of Fateful Adventure in order to add Wandering Gryphon Rider to your hand, discarding something else. Then simply special summon Wandering Gryphon Rider from your hand with its effect. This should activate the other effect of Fateful Adventure in order to equip Dracoback the Rideable Dragon directly from your deck to your adventure token, or add it to your hand to save it for a future turn. So, with a single activation of Rite of Aramesir, plus a discard of one other card, you get a 2000 attack token on the field, an Omni negate with 2800 defense, and an equip spell card that allows you to bounce any card your opponent controls, including floodgates and boss monsters. So this engine excels at getting you a very valuable Omni negate and a very valuable going second tool, all at the same time while not using your normal summon and letting you go +2 in card advantage, all for the low cost of not being able to activate the effects of normal summon monsters during the turn you activate the effect of Rite of Aramesir, which is the restriction that keeps this engine from being played in literally every single deck. The ratios for this engine is to play as many copies of Water Enchantress of the Temple and Rite of Aramesir as possible, then play 1 copies each of Wandering Gryphon Rider, Fateful Adventure, and Dracoback the Rideable Dragon, since all of them are searchable. And finally, you can play 1 copy of Foolish Burial in order to get the engine going, since Water Enchantress of the Temple can search out Rite of Aramesir from the graveyard. Now let's go over the main cards in this combo a little bit more thoroughly. First up, we have Rite of Aramesir. This is the main card you want and simply has the effect to special summon an adventure token if you do not control an adventure token already, which is a Fairy Earth monster that's level 4 and has 2000 attack and defense. Then it allows you to activate Fateful Adventure directly from your deck, which is going to set up your other plays. And lastly, it has a restriction where you cannot activate the effects of monsters that were normal summoned this turn. However, you can activate the effects of special summon monsters as much as you want. So if you're playing an archetype that really needs the effects of the normal summon, like Alistair the Invoker as a classic example, then you might not be able to play this engine because you won't be able to do both in the same turn. However, there are a lot of archetypes that don't really need their normal summon effects, and simply normal summon a monster in order to use them for link plays or for other things. Like how virtual world decks only normal summon their monster just to have a virtual monster on the field, so they can activate all their other virtual monster effects in their hand. A deck like that, which can't even activate the effects of their monsters if they're normal summon, can easily slot in the adventure engine. Next up, we have Water Enchantress of the Temple. This is the main searcher of the archetype, and a big reason why this engine is so splashable. You can banish this card from your hand or graveyard in order to add Rite of Aramesir from your deck or graveyard to your hand. Now, since it can use its effect from the graveyard, this allows you to use the card in your hand in many beneficial ways and then gain advantage from it later. You can simply send it directly from your deck to the graveyard with something like Foolish Burial, and then immediately gain the full advantage of the adventure token engine. Or you can discard it from your hand to activate the effect of something like Forbidden Droplet or Twin Twisters, and then still gain the full advantage of its effect. It also allows you to recur Rite of Aramesir from your graveyard, so it can allow you to have a little bit more longevity with some more adventure tokens later on in the duel. Now, Water Enchantress of the Temple also has another effect, which is not used at all in the engine, where if it's face up on the field and you control an adventure token, you can cheat out one of the field spell cards from your deck that mentions adventure token in its text. Although currently the field spells for adventure token are kinda mediocre, so there's no reason to play them as you never summon Water Enchantress of the Temple anyway. Next up, we have Wandering Gryphon Rider. This card is basically the reason the adventure engine is good. It has the effect that if you control an adventure token and a card or effect is activated, you can shuffle this card from your field back into your deck in order to negate the activation of the card and then destroy it. And also, it can special summon itself from your hand as a quick effect during the main phase, as long as you either control no monsters or control an adventure token. So when the adventure token is out, you can special summon the Gryphon Rider in order to have a free negate. And it also has really good stats for no reason, so you can just bring it down defensive position and it'll be pretty hard for your opponent to destroy it by battle, if they're able to get that far before you use its negate to shuffle itself back into your deck. And you can also just summon it into attack position for 2000 points of damage. And since it's a quick effect to summon the card, if for whatever reason you're locked out of summoning during your turn, you can just wait until the start of your opponent's main phase to bring it out from your hand, as long as you have an adventure token for its negate to be alive. Next up, we have Fateful Adventure. This is a continuous spell card which will be activated directly from your deck with the Rite of Aramesir, but is also a good way to get the engine started in case you draw into it first. It has an effect where once per turn you can add a monster that mentions adventure token in its text from your deck to your hand, then you have to send 1 card from your hand to the graveyard. So what you do is add Water Enchantress of the Temple to your hand, and then simply discard it to get the whole ball rolling, as you can then just banish it from the graveyard to add Rite of Aramesir from your deck to your hand, and then get your adventure token. Although you won't be able to search out Gryphon Rider, you will still be able to gain access to Dracoback. Ideally, you want Fateful Adventure to be activated off the effect of Rite of Aramesir. That way you can search out Gryphon Rider and actually have your negate live. Additionally, the card has two other effects, where the first time a monster you control that is equipped with the card would be destroyed by battle, it's not destroyed, which can give some pretty decent protection to your adventure token if you equip it with Dracoback. And lastly, if a monster is normal or special summoned to either side of the field, you can trigger its effect in order to take an equipped spell card from your deck that mentions adventure token, and then either add it to your hand, or equip it to an adventure token you control. The effect is a hard once per turn, but it also activates from your opponent summoning a monster. And since it's a continuous spell card, you can use Fateful Adventure in order to infinitely recycle Wandering Gryphon Rider from your deck, since its cost is to return itself to the deck for its negate. So as long as you have another card to discard, Journey of Destiny will allow you to have your negate live every turn, which is just another added layer to this engine's already strong repertoire. And lastly, we have Dracoback the Rideable Dragon. This is an equipped spell card which has two effects. If it's equipped to a non-effect monster, which the adventure token is, then once per turn you can return any card your opponent controls to their hand. This effect does target, but it allows you to target any card your opponent controls and not just their monsters. Usually the ability to bounce your opponent's cards is limited to your opponent's monsters, and the versatility of being able to target spells and traps is actually the biggest benefit of Dracoback, because it gives the adventure engine an out to floodgates. If your opponent's using something like Skill Drain, for example, you can use the effect of Dracoback to bounce it to their hand for the turn so that you can have your effects live, and then maybe negate it if your opponent tries to use it next turn with your Gryphon Rider. And because of this bounce, this gives the adventure token some going second power, as it allows you to clear threats your opponent might have built up on their first turn, instead of the adventure engine being a purely going first tool to try to set up the negate with Gryphon Rider. So it's one of those few engines that is good going both first and second, which is not the norm, and it's entirely thanks to the power of Dracoback. It also has another effect, where if it's sent to the graveyard in any way, you can equip it from your graveyard to an adventure token you control. This effect is a hard once per turn and very reminiscent of the Noble Arms equip spell cards, except that it also activates if it's sent from the hand. So if you have a Dracoback in your hand, you can use it as discard needed for Fateful Adventure in order to just equip it to your adventure token anyway, without really losing any card advantage. And there you have it, the important cards of the adventure engine. A funny thing to note is that when the adventure engine first came out, they didn't actually include Dracoback in the engine at first, until they finally figured out that its ability to bounce any card was super useful against floodgates, in which case it retroactively became included in the engine itself. Whereas previously, the engine only cared about going into Gryphon Rider for the negate and didn't really care about the bounce effect of Dracoback at all.